as we move into 2025, a change in the wind in the protection position indicates that something really big and major that we are absolutely not prepared for, that's going to bring us together, could happen. No matter what, Spirit's got a plan. And when we're aligned with that plan, we don't have to chase anything. We have the capacity to tap into inspired evolution. We're always broadcasting and receiving information from a conscious universe because we're part of it. I walked up to the mirror and I said, help me. I can't live inside my skin anymore. I had this shimmering light around me and I heard a voice that said, it's over. And I'm like, it's over? What does that even mean? There was a lot of things that happened at that time that enabled me to actually be of service. When we are in service, that's what this world is all about. Now, the problem happens when we think we know what that is. When we're living out of alignment, when we're misaligned with what we're doing, with our values and what's important to us, etc. That can come because of a number of reasons. We can either be conditioned to choose certain things, like I was raised in by immigrant parents. I'm Canadian. So I know you're in Australia. We kind of share, we share the same king. I think that's what we say now. We used to say the same queen. So they were all about hard work and education. And so they decided I would be a lawyer, right? So that was totally misaligned. I wanted to be a musician. I had an ability to that my poor parents, it actually runs in our family. My dad had this ability to. An addiction ran through my family as well. So that's really, I see a relationship between the capacity that I have to tune into information that I shouldn't, right? That why is it that I can know certain things, or that I would have some cognitive knowledge of people that are complete strangers or whatever? Why would I know these things? And the lack of that kind of psychic boundary between me and other people made me feel unsafe, I think. And also I tuned into, my mom was a Holocaust survivor, actually, so she wasn't safe. But she didn't tell us because she raised us Christians. And it was her father that was, that was Jewish, not her mom. So he was killed in a concentration camp. When she came to Canada, she just made up a whole new life. So there were certain things I felt about the world and about safety, and there was no place where I was just me. So I never knew where I ended and other people began. And even though my mom, for example, never told us anything about her past, I still knew something, right? I felt it. I had dreams when I was a little kid. So I know you asked me first about the dark night of the soul with addiction, but these things are all correlated, right? And for people who are listening today, you don't ever have to have a problem with addiction to understand trauma and what that can actually do to you as you start to develop different kinds of ways in which you find safety and ways in which you survive the world, right? So so addiction totally ran through my family background. My dad was interesting. So I had this ability, and I only found out after my parents died. They both died in my early 30s. And their oldest friends told me, you come by this from your dad. Well, I knew my dad had this ability because he taught me how to read Turkish coffee cups when I was 14, but he never encouraged it. He was an engineer and he was a philosopher and he was an inventor and he did all these, it was very sciencey. So that was never like a thing. But turned out my mom, before we were born, my mother and father were at a cocktail party, and my dad was reading somebody's cup and went into a trance and basically told these people that their spouses were having affairs with each other, and he doesn't remember a thing. So my mother lost her mind and said, "You're never allowed to do that again, ever. I never want to see that again. If you want to stay with me," the end, right? So this kind of intrusive quality that we had shared in common wasn't something that they could even help me with, right? Because that was just verboten. We're not talking about it. So when my Scottish nanny told my mom, she was actually a psychic, so that parents would leave the house and she would invite all her little old lady friends over with their blue hair and read their cards, playing cards at the table. Anyway, one day I would tell her stuff and she told my mom, your daughter with a very heavy Scottish accent, which I know nowadays you're not allowed to do that because it's very taboo. But I used to have a great accent anyway. So I'm not done these days. Anyhow, so she told my mother that I had the site, and my mother was like, no, no, no. And I'm like, I'm on the other side of the dining room door, which would swing. And I'm like, why is she upset? Like everybody in my family wore glasses, and I thought it meant that I didn't have to wear glasses. So I'm hearing my mom really getting upset with Mrs. Kelly. And Mrs. Kelly's trying to explain to her in a Scottish brogue that I had the sight. And my mom is like, I don't want to know about this. And I'm like, why? I mean, it means I don't have to wear glasses. Like I was a kid, I didn't understand it, right? So like, I didn't understand any of it, right? And then things like I would just know somebody would call for my mom, and then I would like all of a sudden blurt out, well, so and so, the woman's husband was doing such and such or whatever. And my mother goes, how do you know that? I said, I don't know. Didn't you just say that? And my mom goes, no. So things like that would happen. So alcohol entered the picture when I was 12. My father was Serbian and Mongolian, actually, which is another interesting part. And we get something called Slivovitz. So I had my first taste of plum brandy. There's a lot of Serbs in Australia. Lots of us there. Anyway, so right away, I felt sewn together. So alcohol was medicinal for me in the beginning. All that wafty, I don't know why I know things, and no boundaries, and feeling like I don't know who I am when I tune into everybody else, just went whoop. So it was originally for me, alcohol was something that could sew me together and I could feel okay. Right. So that was for me. And then, I got a little older, puberty, all that. It just, the ability I have turned, I became very rebellious. Like I still am very rebellious. So, but, and I only wanted to do the things that I wanted to do. And which is like typical teenager, right? But my parents put us in a private girls' school, which costs a lot of money, etc., and very waspy. And we were Europeans, and they were very not. Like we were told we weren't Canadian enough because my dad had an accent and stuff. So it was very, it was very stressful, and so we were kind of like not sure where we belonged. Anyhow, so I went to university. I started drinking with my friends when I was in my teens. And again, it was also to dampen all this extra information that was coming at me all the time. Alcohol took me away from all of that. So then I could make sense of it. It wasn't making any sense to me the way I was. And there was nobody to tell me what to do with it. So at 19, trigger alert, I was gang raped at university. And that set me on a complete self-destructive tangent. I'd been pursuing music. I went to law school for a year. I got into a lot of trouble, so I quit. I was, drinking and taking drugs. Anyway, so I tried to kill myself a couple times. That obviously didn't work. Here I am. But what happened then was I split. I had this psychotic break, but I hovered in the corner of the room and could see all the stories of these guys and their family backgrounds. And I found out after the fact, because they were known to all these other people that I knew in common, that the stuff that I'd heard about them, that I saw about them, was actually true. So, but what it did was enabled me to split my consciousness. And that's actually how I started doing readings. It was like, oh, I could be up there and I could just be me here. So it was when looking back, it was a devastating thing. I mean, to this day, I still have trouble if somebody attacks me. I want to play possum because it was the only way I survived the situation, right? I really could be dead. But anyhow, so without making it too much, but there was a lot of things that happened at that time that enabled me to actually be of service after the fact, once I cleaned up my act. So it took me to, I got involved with cocaine, and drugs was a really big piece. So I always say I took the express train to getting clean and sober, right? Because it's really fast and takes you down to the hell and really quickly. And so I was 26, 27, the 27 club when everybody dies, like Amy Winehouse and everybody, Jimi Hendrix, they were all 27, all of them. So I did not join the 27 club. I actually got clean and sober. And so that became such a big part of my story, because the misalignment that you shared for just whatever reason why you ended up the way you did doesn't really matter. The fact is that when we are not in alignment with, and for me, it's to understand that there is a higher power, a power greater than me, that I am not as important as I think. My pain, my suffering, or whatever. I'm conditioned by the events that happen, but I am not the events. So the identity that I was trying to, that I saw myself as that. So that's what happens when you're in this misalignment. You become that. Like, you actually see yourself as that. That becomes your identity, and you're dying, right? You're dying. So when I got clean and sober, it was funny because the first 2 years, I didn't want anything to do with my ability. Oh my God, no. I was going to get out the garlic and the crosses, right? So I'd get away. But after a couple of years and working a spiritual program and really, really throwing myself into personal transformation, going to Unity Church and really doing all the woo-woo stuff, that was in alignment with personal transformation, not so much the occult, or any of the divinatory things, until I ended up in a therapist that used tarot. So what happened was, at around 2 years of sobriety, earlier than that, I met this therapist who pulled out her tarot cards. Now, at that point, I had been reading tarot since I was 17. During the time I was using and drugging and whatever. I mean, I was my nickname was 411, go ask Colette. I don't know if you have that in Australia, where you want information, please. You just go ask Colette, get her cards out, 411. So, and I would do crazy things with it, and it was not healthy, but so I was already ensconced in all of it. And I'm a complete nerd. So I love to read. And so I was in these old bookstores looking at all the ancient divinatory techniques. So I dove into that while I was using, right? When I got clean and sober, it became very different. So it got a cleaner palette. So when I went to therapy and this woman brought it out, I was like, what am I doing here? You're going to read my cards? I know what this is. And so she took the tarot but spoke to me. She used it in a different way. So that was the moment when I realized that predictions or using it to understand how you manipulate reality or any of those things, right? None of that was useful to me at that point. What she showed me was how this could help with personal growth and transformation, because she was able to show me how to tell a story from a different angle, right? And I'm like, whoa, can I do this? Right? So it's just wait a sec. So I was doing readings. It was so funny because I was pursuing a career in music. I was definitely a musician, a singer-songwriter. This whole thing.
Albums.
Yeah, I mean, I actually got, but that was not till I was 40. I still am in my 20s when I'm telling you this, right? So I failed miserably for years. But anyhow, so I was pursuing that. I needed a day job, but I certified as an aromatherapist. And so I was one of the first aromatherapists in Toronto, where I'm from. And it was brand new and it was very cool to do this. So people would come, only when I would touch them, all of a sudden, I would know things. And so I might say something. And then one day I told this woman the name of her person who had molested her when she was 8 years old and how sorry he was. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. I'm just telling you this, but this is where all your tension is here. And she jumped off the table. And basically, for anybody listening that you're new at this, never do that, ever. You always have to ask permission, right? That was no bueno. But she said to me, how do you know that? I said, I really don't know. Do you want a reading about this? And she goes, yes. So I whipped out my cards. And that's basically how my career began, because she told all her friends and everybody booked a session with me, but they didn't care about the massage. They just wanted me to tell them stuff. So And I think the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I think people are interested in knowing that there is more and how to access that more, right? Like they know, people get to a place where it's like, is this all there is? No, I know there is more than what I see and what I experience in the box that I'm in. And how do I access that moreness, right? That, where is that? And where am I in that? And how do I find myself there? And so my own personal journey, I am living proof that it works, but you have to constantly surrender who you think you are to become someone new, right? To become the person that you're meant to be is all about surrendering the self. And so the program that I was involved in, I'll just be honest. I mean, I worked a 12-step program for like my whole life. And I'm not saying out loud anything because it's an anonymous program and you're not supposed to say that out loud. But, it saved my life. But I've worked a 12-step program for 39 years. And it was really about ego sublimation and the sublimation of the identity of the victim, and to bringing into a more sense of what a humility is and curiosity. And then, you get to that space where it's like, well, who else could I become? And it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a big giant leap. For me, it was incremental over years. But if I met somebody today that knew me back then, they have no clue who I am. They have no idea. Like, they're like, who is this person talking to me? Because I have had so many skins like an onion that I had to peel to get to the core that everybody really is what you're listening to when you say, I know there is more. And that's that authentic core that we have within every one of us. And that means we have to decondition ourselves, and we have to, come and look in the darker places. Go look. Don't be afraid of it. Look it in the eye. And right, and say, you are not me. You are something that has made me who I am, but I am not you. Right? It's really, the shadow work is so crucially important to get to that light. And a lot of people like to skip it.
Hey there, guys. Hopefully you're loving this conversation. I'd just love to take a quick moment of your time to ask for a special favor and request. Please hit subscribe to the channel. The entire channel you're witnessing, you're participating in, you're a part of here is empowered by your subscription. It's you that powers this channel along. Please take a moment to hit subscribe. Thank you so much in advance. Back to the episode. Wow, there is so much to go into there. One of the questions I got, one of the things that, you said you had the express route and you sort of brought yourself out of the addiction. What was because you're talking about surrendering yourself, and I'm conscious that maybe AA supported with that, and your own spiritual and personal development got to that. But at that particular juncture, when you were hitting like
the bottom,
it was time, like when it was time to like make a shift.
What that dark night was for me.
Well, yeah, because I think in that space it was like, hey, I went into like remission, and it was like, oh, like what actually happened there? Because
I can tell you what happened, exactly what happened. I was in a drug dealer's basement. And I went to the washroom. I hadn't slept or bathed for 7 days. We were smoking crack. I got up to it wasn't called that then. It was called Freebase, but that's what it's called now. Mm-hmm. I walked up to the mirror and I saw myself for the first time as I really was. I saw the whites of my eyes were jaundiced. My gums were bleeding. I was scrawny as anything. That was the only good thing, was that, it was like the Ozempic of the 80s, right? So it was cocaine. But I was holding onto the side of the sink, and I said, help me. But it wasn't the kind of help me that was, help me, oh my God, get me out of this, and then I go do it again. It was a complete and absolute, help me, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Can't do this anymore. Like, I can't live inside my skin anymore. Like, it was such a complete core feeling of, I'm done. But I had no clue what that meant. And I had this amazing spiritual awakening in this disgusting bathroom. I had this kind of like and people can say what they will. Oh, she was, she must have been hallucinating because of the drugs. Of course, I hadn't slept, but, I had this shimmering light around me, and I heard a voice that said, it's over. It's over. And I'm like, it's over. What does that even mean? but I just knew and I relaxed. So I left, and I can tell you that I had 2 more kind of experiences with the drug. Actually, I couldn't get high after ever again. It was like the next time I tried it, nothing happened. Nothing. I could not, didn't matter how much I took. I couldn't get drunk. I couldn't get high. I couldn't get anything.
Oh.
I was so not having it. And then New Year's Eve, I was already signed up to go into a treatment center for women. My boyfriend was like, "Oh yeah, you're going away in a couple days. Let's just have one last hoorah." Couldn't get high, couldn't get drunk. I was just sitting there with my eyes wide open going, it's over. And yeah, that's what happened. And so for me, and again, I am absolutely not a religious person, but I am a deeply spiritual person. And I know that there is a higher power for me. I choose to call that higher power God. I'm not interested in the white guy in the sky. I don't give it, that is not the God of my understanding. There is consciousness with a capital C that made me somehow, and that expects me in some way to do the best that I can, to do no harm, and to continue to seek that out in me, right? That authentic core is part of that conscious universe. And it knows the truth of that. That's why I always knew there's got to be more. There is more. And it's not about acquiring anything. It's not about an ego boost. It's not about success according to money, property, or prestige, right? Even though I've had a lot of that stuff. I've had all the success you could think of in the weirdest way possible, in the strangest career that I never wanted to begin with. I wanted something else. I was like, I don't really do this. I'm really a singer. Don't come back next year. That's what I told people. Oh, I don't really do this. It's not really me, this whole thing. But the truth is that when you connect to that, and even if people who are agnostic or atheist and they're just humanists and they believe that there's something in them, that's fine too. I don't care what you call it, but there is something good in us that can lead us into this extraordinary, like what you're doing in the podcast. It's like, this is your path. You were chosen to do this, and you know it. Right? When we are in service, that's what this world is all about. How are we going to be in service? The problem happens when we think we know what that is, right? Because I had 2 entire careers. I chased the music. I chased it. I wanted it. I had no clue that I had so many hidden agendas attached to it, and so much like it was fraught with heaviness, because I wanted it somehow to redeem me, and music was my life, and blah, 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 blah. This was like, oh, whatever. I just am this. Like, what, like, okay. And I never gave out a business card. I never advertised. It was all word of mouth. And, in the first 6 years I did readings, and I'll tell you when I changed it to be more coaching, but intuitive coaching, but I had clients in 29 countries. We didn't have internet. People gave my phone number out in airports, at dinner parties. And I'm not kidding you. I counted clients called me from 29 different countries within the first 6 years that I did these readings. And I was like, what the F? Right? And then I'm like, I don't really do this. No. Right? But then I was like, I started crying. I remember it was 6 years in, and I'm like, oh my God, I am this. Oh my God. And then the fear of responsibility. But anyhow, I still pursued music anyway. Had to give it up because I kept trying to tell the universe this was the way I was supposed to serve. And it kept going, okay, fine, but we'll just keep bringing you clients. Whatever. You'll get tired of that one day. And I couldn't take it anymore, and I quit. And although I will say I must have done 30 vision boards on this, and I literally got every single thing on the vision boards that I did over 30 years, including the name of the record label, including all of it. But I was 40 by the time it was offered to me. They thought I was young. I'm 66 now, so I look young for my age, and I've never had any work done. I'm just youthful, and or else I'm immature. Maybe I'll just call it what it is. But they thought I was really young. They thought I was in my 20s. I didn't tell them. Was going to tell them, and I got everything I wanted, and it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I mean, the music was great. I got great critical acclaim. I wasn't safe. We went to this, like our version of the Grammys, the Juno Awards in Canada. They were all snorting coke in the bathroom. And I was like having a panic attack. And I sat and ate 2 entire meals because I couldn't handle it. And it was this, my favorite wine was on the table, everything. I was sober at that point, 15 years or 16 years sober. And I had to get up from the table and leave. I couldn't even go to the awards thing. I had to go home. So here I was all by myself in this big stretch limo in a snowstorm at the back of it, like in this weird, stupid, like disco lights, long stretch limo, going like, I'm not cut out for this. I can't do this. Right. And I couldn't. And, so I'm glad it didn't happen, but I also am very glad that I could say that I'm talented. Right. But that no matter what, Spirit's got a plan. And when we're aligned with that plan, we don't have to chase anything. It just is. It comes.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
he's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing. And Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. At this particular juncture, I think, thank you so much for sharing that, because when someone pulls an oracle card, it can feel incredibly like aligned with their current situation.
Right.
But I'd love to hear from your perspective, being so deep in this work. How does this process work? Is it purely random, or is there something deeper happening? But prior to that, maybe even, I'd love to get your take, because initially I was like researching tarot and then oracle, and there's a difference between the two. Maybe you can unpack that first, and then you can explain how the draw of the card works. Because you said spirit's always guiding. So please. Yeah. So it's kind of, there's so many complications about what I could tell you. So I built my reputation on predictive accuracy, right? So, and I would be able to take a tarot deck, because I taught tarot for 20 years, 25 years actually, but I would look at the cards and I would see what hovered above them. So I wouldn't really necessarily, I read the cards as if the cards were doorways, and I didn't even open all of them. I just had them in front of me and I could see something. But if you could look at the tarot as a method of engaging in intentional synchronicity, right? So that's for a person who may not be able to see what I can see. Anybody can use the tarot, for example. It's a fixed system. It's always going to be the same. It should always have 72 cards. It will always have 22 trumps and 56
minor cards, and they tell a story, and they're always going to tell the exact same story. They might be different in terms of the themes and also in the author that creates them, but they're always going to, in order to be called a tarot, they have to have a particular format. That's why we call it a fixed system. So it is a system of divination, started in the 1500s. One of the reasons I stopped using the tarot was because they were still built off a medieval there was a medieval concept where you had kings and queens and emperors and empresses and swords and daggers and all this shit, right? So, excuse me, you might have to bleep me out here. I'm a bit of a mystical pirate. So, and people would get scared if they saw certain cards or whatever. And so I thought, I'm going to make my own second opinion deck. And so I took playing cards and I put stickers on them. And I looked at what all these things had in common. So I was fascinated with the comparative concept of looking at different divination systems, right? So this was Western. The Eastern had the I Ching, right? So they had the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. So you have the tarot, you have the I Ching. Then you have other forms of divination. You have runes, which were Celtic and Nordic runes. And then you have other ones beyond this that are a little bit more obscure, which I love, obscure anythings, right? So, I mean, I even learned how to do water divination and bird, it's called bird augury. I've done all that stuff, which is all very wild. But the main thing that they all have in common is a system. And what the system says is that it has to speak to universal experience. Now, at the time, that's why I said, like, the tarot began in the 1500s. People say, oh, it was before, and the Egyptians, they weren't. We know for sure that cartomancy, in terms of that, started in the 1500s, where at the time it really reflected what was going on. And it was a card game originally. But there was the system that was put into it over time, the Hermetic system, etc., were the awakening of the human evolution of the spirit, right? So there was evolutionary qualities to it that was given it later on in the early 1900s. I don't want to get all nerdy on it. Your audience is going to go to sleep on me. But anyhow,
No, I think they'd be super into this. This is, okay. Thank you. Yeah.
So there's some things they all have in common, and that's what's called a lexicon. And a lexicon is a vocabulary, right? So assuming, and what I loved about the I Ching was the book of changes, right? So that, and it too says things like, it still talks about China, that what was like in feudal China, right? It still references feudal China. So when you read it, it's like, you like the army will go to the top of the hill and the fox will fall in the river and don't cross the great shore because whatever, the supreme success. So you have to really kind of work with that. So I'm like, how can I make this more modern? These things, they have all in common. Runes have this in common. The I Ching has it in common. The tarot has it in common, where they tell a story of universality. So all of my oracle decks were based on a system that I created to make it more palatable to a modern, without losing the universality. Because what can happen is, for example, over the past few years, we've had this huge social upheaval, and subjects that we would never have considered before are being spoken about in some of the newer decks, for example, where we talk about allyship, or we talk about diversity, things like that, or you make sure your art has that. So there were things that nobody thought about before that they're thinking about now. So you'll see these things reflected on our current cultural mindset. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in order for a divination system to work, it has to speak to a culture that transcends time, right? Our human culture, the human needs what the human being experiences, regardless of your culture, regardless of the time that you live in, which are simple things, like growth, like protection, like fear, like love, like partnership, like focus, like questioning, like these things that we all do in our daily lives. So it took a bit for me to kind of figure it out. And then from there, so I put those and they use them as a second opinion deck for my clients. This was going back, way back before. And then I found like the first oracle cards came, I think, in the 70s or 80s with Jamie Sam's. There are just a few of them. There were like 4 or 5, a handful, medicine cards and things like that. And they became like, wow, and I love them. And Ralph Blum's runes, he popularized them. So all these things got popularized. And so I thought, and I am an innovator. That is what I'm born to do too. Like I will take something and make something else out of it, right? That's me. So the innovation is all about modernization without losing that center of humanity. So each person that creates an oracle deck is going to choose a theme. Now, most oracle deck creators don't know, and I don't want to, only a few of them that I've run into understand the nature of a lexicon. A lot of them are sayings that they know that are, that are nice things to say that will still speak to you, because you're still always going to ignite something called intentional synchronicity. They're always going to say something to you. But I made my decks to be true divinatory decks. So if they don't have a lexicon that's built into them, you won't be able to do, say, a 3 or 4 or 5 card reading with them, because they're not meant to speak together. Like mine must speak to each other or they don't work, right? So I've done like 19 of these, but they change according to the theme that I've given to them. Like, for example, Hay House asked me to do a goddess deck. I did a goddess deck after doing a lot of research. My dad taught me about spirit animals, which was similar in Slavic folklore, and my great grandmother was Mongolian, like to what you would see in indigenous cultures. But that was really, my father came from our Slavic heritage. So I really wanted to do that. So I did that. So I did themes, right? Mystical shaman came with Alberto Vialdo because he came from Andean shamanism. We decided to get together, and then it's called Mystical Shaman. I'm the mystical, he's the shaman. And so I developed a lexicon and helped him create this based on his language. But they're arbitrary. They're their own worlds. They're not like tarot because they're not fixed systems. They're fluid. So that's another reason why too, people would be like, well, the tarot, you always know what you're going to get with the tarot. And Biddy Tarot, I think she's Australian. So she's got the biggest tarot school, is an Australian woman who's amazing. She's just fantastic. So like we have that, and then we have these. But the oracle cards that I create are meant to be used in readings, are meant to be used as personal growth accelerators also, to show you and reflect to you where you are, what's happening in your world, what the next right action should be and then what you can expect, but knowing that that's only from a particular point of vantage. Right? So they're less about prediction as they are about prescription. That's how I changed the way I worked. I built my reputation on predictive accuracy. But I got to a point where I had done so much of my own personal work. I had changed so radically. I'm like, well, because somebody had predicted a life for me when I was still using and drinking, that would have come true had I kept doing what I was doing. But that was the vantage point that I went to this reading. I went and saw this very famous psychic who told me all this stuff that was going to happen that was so awful and whatever. And I'm like, whoa. And then when I got clean and sober, I still was kind of haunted by that. But then I realized, no, I'm not. That's information that I don't accept that. I'm going to make a change. So free will has to come into the conversation. Otherwise, you're just basically, being a passive armchair astronaut of your life, where somebody tells you what's going to happen, and that's the end of that. So I was like, well, what if they did some work on themselves? Would I not predict something different? Would I not see? So I started saying to them, I said, well, this is from today's vantage point, but if you do this, this, or this other option is here. This is what could come, if you did this. So which is it? Do you want to keep going the way you're going? Or could you have the courage to do this? Because a lot more is available to you if you were willing to change your point of vantage and shift the way you see yourself. So that's how my readings ended up. I've been doing this full time for 36 years now. So, at some point I got really bored of doing that, well, what else is there to tell these people? And then mediumship became such a big thing. But so using oracle cards or the tarot, but I can only really speak to oracle cards because that's been my complete focus over the past, since 2005, although I did one tarot deck. But it's the idea that we have free will, that what we are seeing is possibility and potentiality. And we are always looking from a particular vantage point of our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs in that moment. And if we were to access something beyond that, things could change dramatically. So it's really, for me, it became about empowering people to recognize they had choices. Even in periods of that deep, dark quality of life where you're faced. I mean, I've had many dark nights of the soul since the first one, and realizing like I have a choice of how I'm going to deal with this. Right. So we always have a choice. We don't have a choice on life's terms, because I believe we create reality. I really believe that. But we have to do both, surrender to life on life's terms and create our own reality while that's happening. Right. So it's where are we going to place our attention within that? And one of the people that really changed my life was Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book, Man's in Search of Meaning. And he wrote it about his time in the concentration camp, about how in the direst situation, the direst, most horrific situation, people who found hope, they didn't lose their hope, not hope that they would get out the next day, but hope in humanity and the potentiality in their fellow man, and that they could somehow give of themselves, even they had done nothing. They were the ones who survived, right? And that was the finding meaning in the most difficult situations, that we could find something that has a higher meaning no matter what. And that's really, so that's really why I kept doing what I do, why I have Oracle School, why I have my membership site, why I have everything, is to gather people to say, you have the potential, but you also have to decondition yourself. Because right now, the way our society works, we are bombarded by nothing but what I would suggest would be propaganda. We are like, if all of the media that we ingest is propaganda. It is a constant, and I'm no conspiracy theorist at all. I'm not that. Like, I'm just a person who can open her eyes and have a sovereign mind and go, wow, this is bullshit. Right. I can get sucked into it just like the next person, but this is one big game out there it's like keep looking at this, look over here, don't look there. Oh, look over here. Well, don't look there. And the polarization that we are going through in our world at the moment is because we are not accessing straight facts. We are looking at things from opinions. We are looking at things that are colored by the need, for one thing or the other to somehow put us in a particular silo, if you will. And if we can step back and realize, no, I'm going to make my own decisions. That's hard to do because we are so hypnotized by it. Social media. Now I've gone off on a tangent, my gosh. But all of that, right? It makes it very hard for us to remember that there is more, that we are more, because our world gets smaller and smaller according to what we allow ourselves to be impacted by or influenced by.
There's many questions. Universality was a really big piece. You mentioned the word intentional synchronicity, which is really interesting. The concept of free will also is a massive one. But I also want to double click on that paradox that you surrender, like you said, you've got to surrender to life, but also take charge and control. Because I think at this particular point, there's like, even coming to a reading, like, is it serendipitous? Is it like, were you always going to come to that reading to get that information to get you on where you were going? Like, the word destiny sort of is has a very curious play.
Destiny is something we participate in. Fate is something that just is, right? The fate that I was born with parents I was born in 1958, like when I was born, the day I was born, all of those things are my fate. I can't change those things, but I can change my destiny. Because my destiny is to do, like, you can look at an astrology chart, for example, that you can see you can see all the person's potentials, but not what they're going to do with those potentials, right? Like, that's just the umbrella. Then what are they going to do? What's the action plan within that, right? So let's say you're dealing with a devastating situation and you have to rise to the occasion somehow, or maybe you don't do it the best that you can, but you just do it. You still have to choose, right? Like, and I think a lot of people are asleep to that, that they're not awake to the fact that they have a choice. That's my point about being somehow, in a way, manipulated by that. But let's say, for example, you decide to get a reading. You go there, you're going to have a feeling about it. Like, what presents that? What makes you feel like you should go do that, right? Something in you, maybe the inspiration that comes. Like, I really believe that we're always broadcasting and receiving information from a conscious universe because we're part of it. Our mind is not generated by our brain receives it, right? So that we are constantly in communication, and maybe that, that's part of the game that we're playing, that we get this intuition that I need to go do this. And then you get information in that moment that triggers something and say, and then what happens to us too, by the way, is the reticular activating system of our brain starts to wake up and go, oh, they want to see more of that. So then we get more into alignment with that higher destiny, that we become the person that can have that. And then everything shifts, brain plasticity, everything. We're like one walking organism of intuition, instinct, intelligence, all of it, creating destiny.
But then does that lead the reading to become a self-fulfilling prophecy of its own accord?
You can have a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, I think you can. I think you can become what you're told. I think that's what's a little dangerous sometimes.
And is that why potentially there's taboo around some of this stuff?
I think that's the ethics and responsibility that's really important for the people who are doing the readings. What kind of information, how are you going to couch it? How are you doing your own work? Like, I think every person who does this work needs to be in therapy or needs to have done their own work before they start this, right? Like, I really believe that we have to be clean filters, because we are going to read to the filter of our life experience and personality. And if it's dirty and if it's, and if it's got all kinds of muck in it, we can really mess with somebody. I really believe that it's super important. I would never, ever, ever touch a deck of cards if I didn't bring myself in, or a client. I don't do clients anymore, but I have to stay very clean. I have to stay neutral. I have to say what's going on for me. Am I projecting what's happening? So yeah, I think you can, but it's not even so much about a reading. It's about for yourself. You can create your own self-fulfilling prophecy, by deciding that you are more and deciding that you can become that. You are going to be that. You will be that. If you say, I am that, you will be that. You will. You create that. Well, if a world event, for example, comes along and because there's certain things that override, there's a culture override, something that happens in the world that overrides the direction you're in, you have to go off on a detour. But at some point, you're still going to become that thing that or that part of you, that self that has the experience that you've claimed for yourself. It just went on a detour. It's still going to get there. Right? It's like, what am I going to be like during the detour? Well, and it's all done out of curiosity and non-attachment. It's like, I am this. If I am this, I am this. And eventually I am going to see that I am this. But we have to start with the I am. And the I am within each one of us is the God force in each one of us that recognizes good, that recognizes what evil is, that recognizes ego, that recognizes soul, that recognizes service, that recognizes self-serving, that recognizes all those things. That's in there.
Do you have any examples of some really incredible shifts that have happened thanks to some readings? Do you have a couple you might want to share?
Of readings for other people or for?
Yeah, for others.
Yeah. So, I can tell you one that.
Please.
I'm trying to say, I have I don't disclose any of I have a non-disclosure thing about readings, but I have been able to talk about some things. How about so there was a person that called into my radio show. Here's a good example. Somebody I did a reading for on the radio, right? On the radio. Mm-hmm. So this was on the radio and it was live for people, right? So this is 2006 or 2007. So I'd done a reading and on one of the shows, and about the fact that this woman was going to get out of her circumstances in a way that was, really uncanny, and that she needed to be open to it. But it was really important for her to just surrender because she was losing her mind. She left an abusive relationship and went into a shelter with her 2 kids. She was a nurse. She had a good career, whatever, and just had to run away, basically, right? So called into the show. Anyway, so I just said that just watch for these signs, right? So she called back again and said she had been doing what I suggested, which was like, find that part in you that has the life that you want, that that is more, that it's not the shelter, it's not that. You are that every day. Act as if that's true. Help somebody worse off than you. Just do that. Right? Just do that. Because I'd seen that in her reading, that if you do these things, you will not stay there, but it's going to create the need for you to actually refuse your reality. Just refuse it. Say, be grateful for it and refuse it at the same time. Thank you so much. There is more, right? Thank you so much. There's more. And so she goes, I did it because I had nothing else to do. I had already hit bottom with this. It's whatever. So what happened was, she kept applying for jobs, and finally she did get a job that was what she was trained to do, right? But it was 2 hours away. She just thought, what the hell? Then she goes, it's going to take me forever to get there. And my kids, no one's going to look after my kids. We're in a shelter, but I'm going to say yes to the job. So anyway, so she was a regular caller to the show. So what happened was, she had said, okay, I'm going to keep doing what Colette said, was like, I'm going to keep saying, I whatever it is, I'm going to get there. I'm just going to get there. I'm going to say yes to the job. Yes to the job. Because I see myself, whatever. She needed a car because she could not have taken care of her kids. She couldn't have picked up her kids. She didn't know how that was going to happen. So the weekend before she was going to start this job, she had no transportation. She had nobody to look after her kids, right? She was just like, what is going to happen to me? So her former neighbor, where she had lived with her ex-husband, this lawyer showed up, and the husband wasn't home. The neighbor was outside, says, oh, I know where she's not there now. He says, I'm here to deliver something. And she's at a shelter. So she gave him the information where he could find her. So it turns out when she was a little kid, she had a great uncle that she would go visit him. And he had one of these either a Plymouth or dark, I don't know, like a collector's car way back when in the 60s, right? So, and she would go and play in the car, and he would take her with the top down and everything. She's in California. And she loved it. And she just remembered that her fondest memories was him driving around in a car. And then they moved away to Midwest or whatever. And then they moved away. And then she never saw him again, really. And he died recently. So he was old, and he was in the longest period of time in a home or something. So he left her that car in his will. So she needed a car, but this was this collector's car that turned out to be worth a fortune. So she sold it. Got to rent a place close to her job, bought a little secondhand car that was in mint condition. She made this thing was worth $200,000. It was some real specialty car. And she managed to do that all. I mean, it wasn't within the week, but she got actually, I think the lawyer lent her money. I don't know how it went down, but anyhow, so she ended up doing that. But she said, if I had kept identifying myself as a person who was in an abusive marriage, who ended up in a shelter, and I was homeless, and I kept seeing myself that way, but you kept telling me I wasn't that. Right. And that was one of the things that came out of one of the readings. Another reading, which I will say, totally different than this, different kind of an outcome. Oh, I did tell somebody that they were pregnant, and they didn't know they were pregnant. That was one. I'm like, you're having a baby. No, I'm not. Oh, I said, oh, yes, you are. I see a baby. And it was like, and then she called me a week later. Oh my God, I'm pregnant. But anyhow, there was those things. But that was just because I could see it. But another one was when somebody doesn't listen to the whole reading. Okay, so when people go to a reading and they only want to hear what they want to hear. So she was drawn to come to a reading. This was when I was still doing readings before I got to Hay House. This is like back in the early 90s. She came. I want to know if I'm going to get married. So I'm like, okay, I met this guy. I met him on a trip. I need to know is he going to ask me to marry him? Right? That's what she came for. So I'm looking at these cards, and I did do the tarot, and I was like, okay, do you want to know about what this is going to do for you? Or do you want to know if he's going to ask you? Because he's going to ask you. Oh, good. Oh my God. I knew it. I said, but do you not want to know about all this other stuff that I'm seeing? This guy looks like a criminal. Like I'm like trying to, I don't want to hear that. I know about his past. I said, okay, do you want to know about, all of this? Like there's a lot of like dishonesty. I totally know he came clean. He told me all about his past. You don't need to go any further. And I'm like, okay. So 6 months later, she comes back. You didn't tell me he was a con artist. It's all your fault. You told me. I said, no, you wanted to know if he was going to ask you to marry him. Jack the Ripper could have asked you to marry him. You wouldn't let me tell you he was Jack the Ripper. I said, I remember your reading. All right. And she goes, oh, well, I know. And she goes, well, what's going to happen now? I said, you're going to get a divorce and I'm not going to charge you for a reading. And I think you should go home and get some therapy. And like, don't go to any more psychics. Go and clean yourself up and basically realize that you've got to take care of these things now. And I'm not going to do a reading for you. That was the other thing. Like I wouldn't take clients if they kept coming back around the thing when they really needed actual psychological counseling. Is what she really needed was counseling, because she was going to do the same thing again. I just did a few cards going, you're going to do this again. I'm not going to do a reading for you. You're got Mr. Clunker number 2 coming around the corner. You don't need to do that. So go take your money and go see a therapist. I'm not charging you. Right? I have never saw her again, but go ahead.
Colette, how do you do readings for the collective? And I was inspired, maybe you might be willing to do a reading for 2025, because I see you do monthly readings for
I would love to.
Channel for you did a really interesting one for December 2024 coming up. But I was wondering if how does that even work? Like, do you feel into the field? Is it just universality on steroids?
I just tune into the field.
Yeah, right.
So I tune into the field, and what I ask for is to show me a reflection of the themes we are going to be dealing with in the early part of the year. That's what I'm going to do. All right. Okay, so that's the kind of reading that I'm going to do.
Thank you.
And I knew you were going to ask me that. So I was going to actually suggest that we do that. So I already prepared. I did. And I usually meditate before I do this. And I did before. Hang on 1 second. Let's do this. I hope this was interesting. I did a lot of talking.
It truly was interesting. It still is.
Okay, good. I always worry. Oh my God, am I talking too much?
Self-conscious much.
Now you can see amazing. My painting is beaming from the canvas. Okay, good. So let's take a look at. This is really for your audience. So how about whoever is listening? These are the themes that you'll be particularly dealing with, or the collective. But I think if people are meant to hear this, they'll hear it through your podcast. And then I can do a reading for you if you want.
I think the collective is plenty good. I'm just conscious of how much time we have, because I'd like to sort of also unpack some more questions on the other side.
Okay, good. I've never heard anybody say no to me. Okay, that's fine.
I'm being selfless as an audience.
No problem. You can always call me another time. Okay, so here's what's interesting. The first card is a card that's called Blessed, and it's in the protection position. So it's telling us that there's a shadowy quality to the world at the moment. And as we move into 2025, it's requiring us to take a look at the fact that where we place our attention is what we're going to see more of. So we need to remember that we are blessed with the fact that we have life, with the fact we have a life force moving through us, with the fact that we have the capacity to be creative, with the fact that, we can participate in our lives in such a way. And we have lives now. My dogs are barking. Sorry, they never bark until I get on a podcast. No, it's okay. You don't bark. Mommy loves you. Hang on a sec. Yeah, no. You don't go barky. No, you're going to be a good girl. So when we look at this, it reminds us that our blessings don't come from the outer world. They have to come from inside us. We have to start recognizing that what we are seeing in front of us are things that have happened that were set in motion in the past. And so we have to trust that there are more beautiful things coming down down the road as we make our repairs, because mending is the second card, which is about repairing what is broken, and not just that, but building something new. And we're required to be flexible. Flexible is the next card. Resilient, flexible, not be rigid in what we think has to happen. Like things, what was really interesting, and I don't talk about politics, but I will say this one thing. Every single country that had their elections, pretty much every single one, chose to get rid of their incumbents. They chose disruptors, right? They chose change and disruption. And as Pluto has moved into Aquarius, which is the planet of death and transformation, Aquarius is about the best for the people. So we've got to trust that whatever things are breaking down are there for us to build anew. Repair what we think should be reclaimed, but build new things. That's where our focus needs to be, is what do we want? A leg up is about asking for help. So it's about knowing that this is no longer the time of complete and absolute independence, right? And self-serving. We are communities. It's about bringing ourselves into community with one another, right? That knowing that we can help somebody, they can help us. This is a sharing, collaborative time. A change in the wind in the protection position indicates that things can happen that we are absolutely not planning. Like a big world event that we weren't planning, like somebody dropping a nuclear bomb somewhere, like a small one, like something really big and major that we are absolutely not prepared for, that's going to bring us together, could happen. It could be a weather event, could be something that that is a threat of that, right? I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm not predicting a nuclear bomb, just so you know, right? So, but getting so close to the precipice of, we don't want this. And then chop wood, carry water, which is all about, we just got to keep doing the work. And the other thing too, when looking at this, if you are inspired, like that's why you call it inspired evolution, right? And I really believe that's what we are in right now. We have the capacity to tap into inspired evolution. Inspired means of the spirit. It means that we receive our inspiration, right? And every one of you listening to this podcast count. You matter. Your dreams matter. Your sense of that there is more, that you can become more, matters. Be that. Do it. Take the risk. Be courageous. Be brave. You're going to need to be brave. But don't acquiesce to somebody else's idea of who they think you should be. You need to be who you're here to be. And that's living your life on your own terms, regardless of the fact that society or whatever is putting all restrictions on you or whatever. Even within that, you still have to find your own personal meaning. Because that's what we're all faced with right now. And that's the Aquarius too. Aquarius is an innovator. They are the ideas sign. They are the sign of that higher mind. And I think that that's just so important, that everybody listening, you are not powerless. You're not. You can make your own decisions. And no matter what they are going to be right for you. They'll be right for the collective. Even if, and that's the other thing too, like with the polarities that are happening. I am old enough to remember when debating was okay. Having a debate. I was on the debating team at school, right? So when you debate your side of something and respectfully listen to somebody else's, it's fine. Listen, we've been manipulated to see each other as enemies and whatever. At some point, that's going to get old. We can't do that anymore. This is not the time. We've got to meet somewhere in the middle. We have to find a way. We have to find a way. Everybody thinks their way is the right way. Well, what if there was a way that everybody could somehow find it's not big compromising your integrity. It's about collaborating with different ideas. That's really what we're being called. And you are the generation, not my generation. I mean, I think I'm Gen X. I just missed the boomers. I'm definitely not a boomer, but you're the younger generation. You're the ones that are leading. You have to lead this world for the next generation. You are the leaders. I'm like the crone now. Like I'll give you whatever wisdom that I have to see, but you're the ones that are going to lead. and leading from the integrity of inspiration, I think, is super important.
Thank you for that blessing. You've been doing this for quite some time now, as you've said so yourself.
36 years.
Have you seen a significant shift through the ages? Like more and more conversations like this are becoming more and more available. Like, do you see a shift at large? Like, is there where do you think it's,
Well, what I think is interesting is
inspiring? Yeah.
I have seen a complete shift. Remember when I started doing this was so fringe. I couldn't even tell people I did this for a living. They saw me as like Madame Zora in the gypsy tent down the road. Like, not that there's anything wrong with that. My father's nickname was Gypsy. But, it's now very mainstream. Astrology is everywhere. Manifest was actually the word chosen by the Cambridge University. The Cambridge Dictionary, the word for 2024 is manifesting. That's the word. So it's like, we're in this. This is now mainstream, as well as a need and a desire to find a spiritual path. Like spirituality, even though there's like in America, I think there's an upsurge in the Christian fundamentalist viewpoints. But I think no matter what, finding a way back to some type of conversation around consciousness and spirituality, practical spirituality, has also become mainstream, right? So the conversations about thinking for yourself, I think, are still fringy. I think, right? But I am like, I'm pretty conservative. Like, I'm in the middle of everything. Like, I'm like Switzerland. As people say to me, like, what do you, and I went, I'm Switzerland. Because I've been around long enough to know it's going to change again. Pendulum's going to swing like this. So I'm going to sit right here and wait for you guys when you are ready to talk about what do we do next, right? How do we manage these extremes, and how can we find a collaborative viewpoint that can help everybody?
Brilliant.
So I'm in it for the ride. Amrit, I got to tell you, I'm in it for the whole ride. I don't know. I'm always learning. I think that was the one thing my dad taught me. He said, when you stop learning is the day you start dying. I am curious. Curiosity is our superpower. I don't know the answers. And we could just be an alien board game at the end of the day. How do we know when we die? Like, I'm a medium. I talk to all these dead people. Like, what the hell? I don't know. Like, where are they? Nobody ever tells me. So it's like, where are we? Are we all part of a game? Who knows? But the main thing is we are playing the game of life, and we are in Earth School. And we got to do the best we can. Because guess who was it? I heard Jerry Seinfeld say yesterday, this is not a la carte menu. We're born, we live, we die. Not a la carte. We get all three, right? What are we going to do in the living part? What are we going to do? Right? Right? What are we going to do? And that's the thing. And I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm never too old to do anything. I just started a whole art career. I'm doing music again. I don't give a shit. Like, I'm going to just keep rocking on until it's done.
Super inspiring. Colette Baron-Reid. My goodness. Thank you so much today for your time and energy and sharing yourself so abundantly here with us. And as always, it's hard to ignore the fact that this conversation stands on your entire life's work. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. There is so much deeper. We could have gone into so many different rabbit holes as well. That would have been super enriching as well. So yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much for for you doing your work. It's been, I can imagine, like you said, way back when it wouldn't have been as well received. And yet, you followed your authentic guidance and intuition. And my God, like your story, thank you so much for sharing yourself. So
we definitely with us too. Thank you for having me. Yeah. I love your podcast. I think you are so special. I think you are so important right now. You're a voice that's really meaningful, very important. Your story is important. And thank you for existing. Otherwise, nobody would be listening to me right now.
Touch wood. You're too kind. You're too kind. I'm sure they would be in some other manifest way. But thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Amrit.
Alrighty, Inspired Soul, you've made it through to the end of another Inspired Evolution podcast. Thank you so much for your inspiration to evolve. I'm so inspired by your persistence, your diligence, your dedication to your inner work. to evolve. On screen right now is an opportunity for you to continue your inspirations and to keep the evolution flowing. There are a couple of episodes on screen which are two personal favorites of mine. As always, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps so much more than we can say. This entire channel is powered by your subscription. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.